Most people don't realize that emotional cheating often begins with denial, not intention. Long before lines are crossed, the mind quietly rewrites the rules. What feels harmless at first slowly becomes something harder to name and even harder to admit. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand why emotional cheating denial is so powerful, how the brain protects itself from guilt, and why people can sincerely believe they've done nothing wrong while drifting far from emotional honesty. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness, patterns, and clarity. Emotional cheating denial exists because the human brain is wired to preserve a positive self-image. Most people want to see themselves as loyal, caring, and ethical. When behavior threatens that identity, the mind looks for ways to soften the truth. It does this quietly, without conscious effort. In psychology, this process is known as cognitive dissonance. It's the discomfort we feel when our actions don't match our beliefs. Instead of changing behavior immediately, the brain often changes the story. If nothing physical happened, the mind concludes that nothing serious occurred. This is why emotional cheating is so easy to deny. There is no single dramatic moment, no clear line. It unfolds through conversations, shared jokes, private messages, and emotional reliance. Each step feels small on its own, which makes the overall shift hard to see. The brain also relies heavily on comparison to justify behavior. A person may think, "At least I'm not sleeping with them," or "Everyone talks to friends this way." These comparisons reduce internal alarm signals and make questionable behavior feel normal. Have you ever noticed how people defend actions they would criticize in others? That gap between self-perception and reality is where denial thrives. Another powerful force behind emotional cheating denial is dopamine. Emotional novelty activates the brain's reward system. New attention, validation, and excitement release dopamine, which enhances focus and emotional bonding. The brain begins to crave the interaction, not the person's well-being. Because dopamine feels good, the brain frames the source as safe. It doesn't label it as a threat to the relationship. Instead, it labels it as stress relief, friendship, or emotional support. The reward comes first, the justification follows. This is why emotional cheating often intensifies during periods of stress or dissatisfaction. The brain seeks relief, not disruption. It chooses the path that feels comforting without forcing a hard confrontation at home. A subtle but important shift happens here. Emotional needs that once belonged inside the primary relationship begin to move elsewhere. The person may still love their partner, but emotional intimacy is now divided. Denial protects this shift. Admitting the truth would require difficult conversations, boundaries, or loss. The brain delays that pain by insisting nothing inappropriate is happening. In real life, this often shows up as secrecy without obvious guilt. Phones are tilted away, conversations are minimized, details are omitted, not because the person wants to hurt their partner, but because transparency would force awareness. The absence of physical contact makes this secrecy feel justified. The mind says, "If there's nothing to hide, I wouldn't feel the need to hide." That logic runs backward, but it feels convincing in the moment. Here's a surprising insight. Many people in emotional cheating denial genuinely believe they are being honest. Their internal story feels true to them. Denial doesn't always look like lying. Often it looks like selective attention. The brain focuses on evidence that supports innocence and ignores signals that suggest emotional betrayal. Emotional attachment, excitement, and anticipation are reframed as harmless connection. This pattern becomes even stronger when the emotional bond feels validating. If the other person listens deeply, offers praise, or provides comfort, the brain associates them with safety and understanding. That emotional contrast makes the primary relationship feel heavier by comparison. Have you ever wondered why emotional cheating partners are often described as just friends with intense certainty? That certainty is part of the defense mechanism. Another layer of denial comes from moral licensing. When someone sees themselves as a good partner overall, they unconsciously allow small boundary violations. The mind balances perceived good behavior against questionable actions and concludes that everything evens out. This is why emotional cheating denial can persist even in people who value commitment deeply. Values don't disappear, they get compartmentalized. The brain is remarkably skilled at separating emotional experiences into different mental boxes. One box holds the committed relationship, another holds the emotional escape. As long as the boxes don't touch, the person feels internally consistent. Problems arise when the boxes inevitably collide. Emotional energy is finite. Attention, patience, and vulnerability start flowing unevenly. The primary partner feels distance without knowing why. Denial delays this realization. It keeps the person from asking hard questions like, why do I look forward to these conversations more? Or, why don't I share this with my partner? Here's a question worth sitting with. If the roles were reversed, would this behavior feel harmless? Emotional cheating denial also thrives on ambiguity. Because boundaries around emotional intimacy are rarely discussed clearly, people default to personal interpretations. What feels inappropriate to one person feels normal to another. This ambiguity gives the brain room to maneuver. Without explicit rules, denial fills the gap. The mind chooses the interpretation that protects comfort and connection. Over time, emotional attachment strengthens through repetition. The brain forms neural pathways associated with safety, excitement, and emotional relief. The bond feels natural, even necessary. At this stage, denial often shifts from "nothing is happening" to "this is too important to lose." The emotional connection feels justified by its perceived benefits. Ending it would feel like self-harm rather than integrity. This is where emotional cheating denial becomes most entrenched. The outside relationship feels like a lifeline. The brain resists any narrative that threatens it. Ironically, many people in this position believe they are avoiding harm by not acting physically. They see restraint as proof of loyalty, while ignoring the emotional displacement already underway. Emotional cheating denial also affects how people react when confronted. Defensiveness often comes from genuine confusion. The internal story doesn't match the accusation, so the response feels unfair. Understanding this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains the intensity of the reaction. The mind is defending an identity, not just an action. If you've ever felt unsettled by a partner's insistence that it's nothing, this psychological process may be why. The denial isn't always manipulative. Sometimes it's protective. So what breaks emotional cheating denial? Awareness usually begins with emotional honesty rather than rules. When someone pauses to examine where their emotional energy goes, denial weakens. The brain can no longer avoid the pattern once it's named. Naming doesn't require condemnation, it requires curiosity. Asking, "What need is this meeting?" opens the door to accountability. For those on the receiving end, clarity matters more than accusation. Emotional cheating denial collapses faster when boundaries are discussed calmly and specifically rather than emotionally or vaguely. Here's another insight. Denial doesn't mean the person doesn't care. Often, it means they care deeply and are afraid of what truth would demand. The psychology of emotional cheating denial reveals something deeply human. We are not just rational beings. We are emotional systems designed to avoid pain, preserve connection, and protect identity. The danger isn't that denial exists. The danger is staying inside it too long. When emotional awareness replaces denial, relationships gain a chance to reset. Boundaries become clearer. Emotional intimacy becomes intentional again. If this topic resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on where your emotional energy flows most naturally. Awareness is often the first quiet step towards healthier connection. If you found this perspective helpful, you're invited to share your thoughts, reflect further, and continue exploring the psychology behind human behavior and relationships.